Hi, my name is Dr. Felucia, and I'm a licensed psychologist. And in today's video, I'm going to be talking about some tips for thriving during the holidays. I know that for a lot of you on this channel, you've experienced spiritual abuse, emotional abuse, and just other types of psychological abuse that can make the holidays pretty draining and just something else that's coming up that you dread. And so the point of this video is to help you manage that and even thrive during these times. So the first thing that I really want you to focus on, if you don't remember anything else in this video, is exercise your autonomy. And a lot of times it's difficult for us to do that when the holidays come up because there are all these obligations and expectations around what we should be doing and what other people should be doing and how things look. And, the media presents a very like candy coated, sugar coated image of what the holidays are. So you'll see people all around the table and happy and sharing. And for many people, that's not what holidays are. If they are, it's a veneer, right? Because that might be a little gloss over some really challenging family interactions. And not only just family, it could be just with other people. It could be how you are supposed to interact and engage with your spirituality during this time. And so I want you to remember to exercise your autonomy and remember that you're not where you used to be. So when people are survivors of emotional abuse and spiritual abuse and other types of psychological abuse, they don't feel like they have any power, right? And so a lot of times they'll go back to situations and think, well, remembering the helplessness that they felt and carry that into this situation, especially that have people who have dealt with abuse in childhood. You might have left your home, but you still may be functioning in some ways like you are a child in that home. And so it's important to look at the techniques and the things that helped you survive before and survive really horrible situations are understandable, but they're not going to be effective as you are going through challenging situations, especially the holidays, which is what I'm talking about in this video. So exercise your autonomy. And what that means is that you don't have to do anything you don't want to do, right? And so for a lot of times when people are just stressed out and fatigued during the holidays, they'll mention, well, I have to go to this person's house and we have to do this, and this is the tradition. And I want you to take a different approach, that you're an adult and you don't have to. You can opt out of certain things. I'll get to that a little bit later. So the first one is exercise your autonomy. And if you haven't already, I'm going to take a moment to ask you, if you haven't already and you would like to, please take a moment to like, share, and subscribe this video, or subscribe to this channel and and comment and share on this video. It would just really help in terms of getting this information out to others like you who are being helped by it. Okay. So the second thing is remembering how abusive people operate, right? We don't want them to take up too much space in our minds, but at the same time, we have to remember that abusive people can really prey on the holidays and use that as just another way of weaponizing shame and guilt against you. And people who are psychologically abusive and spiritually abusive, this is like their thing. This is their thing to do. And so you have to remember that if that is what they do, and if they're weaponizing and capitalizing on feelings of shame and guilt, recognize that and be aware of the feelings of shame and guilt that you may have, but don't necessarily react to them. And I have some videos on this that I would encourage you to watch, but it's really important as part of your healing journey to understand your relationships with both shame and guilt. Shame is basically saying you're a horrible person. And then guilt is, well, you should have done better. And either thing is, it's not a pleasant emotion to deal with, but at the same time, people who are abusive weaponize these things and they want you to feel guilty or feel ashamed or feel shame because you're not going along with their agenda. And so as you understand how these feelings of shame and guilt are weaponized, and how people who are abusive will use the holidays to capitalize on that. You can prepare yourself and you can be proactive instead of reactive. What I mean by that is, just don't say, sometimes people will just say, yes, they'll agree to a request automatically, and it will be because out of guilt, right? Oh, I haven't seen this person in this long and they really want me to come, even though you know that that person is just a draining person and you hate going to see them, you don't like interacting with them. So think about that, think about how you respond to guilt or respond to shame, and be proactive, meaning you're going to act out of what you want to do instead of feeling like this is what you're supposed to do. And that's not selfish. That's something that if you are, if you're in therapy, I would encourage you to talk about that with your therapist, that doing what works for you is not necessarily a selfish or bad thing. But that's something that you learn over time. But while you're thinking about that, also remember that you don't have to make a decision in any moment, and practice doing something where you don't commit to anything. So if someone says, hey, we're having this thing, say, okay, that's great, I'll get back to you, right? Or maybe someone says something that irritates you, and you practice not responding or trying to reassure them of something. Sometimes people will deal with people who use shame and guilt and say, well, you don't really love us, or you don't care about us. And then the response is, oh, I do, but this and this and this, and get in this whole thing of explaining yourself. And you don't want to do that. If you need to remain silent, you can, and just sit with the awkward silence for some time, or say, you know what, I'd be happy to continue this discussion, but at a later time, not right now. And so practicing little phrases like that can really help you in managing some of the stress that comes with the holidays, right? And knowing how people, use shame and guilt as a way of controlling you. Another thing to think of, and I'd mentioned this before, is deciding what you're going to opt into and also what you're going to opt out of, right? So I have here in my notes that, when you look at what you want to do. Not everything that is part of the holidays not all that stuff has to be part of your holiday, right? Sometimes people choose to not celebrate a holiday altogether, and that is within your power to do so. So sometimes when we feel closed in and we feel, oh my goodness, this is too much, let's think about the options we do have and what you can opt into, and also what you can opt out of. You can say, you know what, I'm opting out of everything this holiday season. I'm starting from scratch, and there are certain things that I will opt into, right? And that is well within your right to do so, right? And so you can, when you're doing that, you're in the space of, this is something I choose to do versus this is something I have to do. And then something else that you can do too is remember that you can also start, traditions of your own, right? That's part of what I talked about before with exercising autonomy. So you don't have to do things the way everyone else is doing them or what everyone else expects you to do. And then something else also to really remember that's very, very important is going back to the basics, because the holidays tend to be stressful. You want to plan out ahead how you are going to care for yourself in tangible and meaningful ways. No, first thing, making sure you're eating well, having things planned for your meals so that you are not in space where you are nutritionally depleted, because it can be really hard to make the right decisions when we're hungry or we just haven't been taking care of ourselves. The second thing too is sleep, and making sure that your sleep is protected. So whatever you need to do to protect that sleep, do that. Again, that sometimes when we've been through these really challenging psychologically abusive situations, it can rob us of our sleep. It can rob us of our appetites, or maybe we're not eating the things that fuel our bodies and help us. So think about the basics, getting your meals, getting your sleep, and also doing some journaling, right? Or whatever self-care practices that you like to do. I have a video where I talk about some non-therapy things you can do today. So I'd encourage you to watch that so you can understand some things that you can do right now, right? Whether it's taking a walk, whether it is, finding something that you do that soothes your soul, but you really want to get back to those basics. And if possible, start them before the holiday season so that when you're in the holidays that you are not skimping on those routines. And if you didn't get to do it before the holidays, that's fine. There's no time like the present to start. You can pick one thing and you can start and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And this is how I'm going to care for myself. And this is how, these are what I like to call the non-negotiables, right? So we're not going to mess with our nutrition. We're not going to mess with our sleep, and everything else is going to have to fall in place around those things. And so, maybe, anyway, I'll get to that point later. But another thing you want to remember too, is that these things take practice, right? Every holiday season, think back and say, well, what are some things I did differently this year that I'm proud of? And then also remember, look, that the holidays will not last forever. For some of you, that is a relief. You can't wait for things to go back to normal. For some of you, that could be a place of sadness. Maybe there are some fond memories that you have regarding the holidays, or maybe for you, it's sweet times with people that you don't get to see that often. But remember that regardless, that this is not going to last forever. This is a phase, just a part of the year. And so putting these things and putting the holidays in proper perspective is really, really important. And so, again, I've gone over several things, I'll repeat them. Number one, exercise your autonomy, right? And understand what you do have control over. Number two, I think is the biggest one, is remember how abusive people operate, and they're going to weaponize shame and guilt against you. And so when you see that, you want to be not reactive, but proactive, and practice how you can do that, right? A lot of the battle is just recognizing when these things are happening. And so when people are using shame and guilt to try and control you, you don't have to respond to that. You can sit, and this is something else that you'll learn in therapy. You could talk to your therapist about practicing this, but learning to sit with discomfort and challenging emotions, and understanding that feelings of shame and guilt are horrible, but they're not going to kill you, right? No one has ever died of being ashamed or died because their family made them feel guilty for not cooking something or attending something, right? So learn to put those feelings in proper perspective. And when you can sit with those challenging feelings for some time, you learn that I don't have to respond to them. I can feel guilty for saying no and still say no, right? So remember the shame and guilt that I talked about. And then also, this is kind of a summation of the last ones that I've brought up, is that think about what you want to opt into, right? You can just say, look, I'm opting out of everything and I'm going to start from scratch and choose what you want to do. Also remembering that as you are choosing what you want to do, we're not going to mess with the non-negotiables. That's our nutrition, that's our sleep, that's our self-care. You have got to keep those things in place so that you are at your best to even make these decisions. If you're sleep deprived and not getting the nutrition you need, you're not going to make the best decisions. And then also just remembering to put all these things in perspective, that the holidays will not last forever. Feelings of guilt and shame that you may have won't last forever. The important thing is, are you doing what you are doing out of choice, or do you feel weaponized? Do you feel like things are being weaponized against you, and so you are acting out of shame and guilt? And we're not perfect, right? So it's also important to remember that as you're doing this, it's a work in progress. And so you might make some mistakes, you might do something you don't want, and that's okay. And in fact, it's even important to remember that in the moment. A very powerful thing you can do is, let's say you just knee-jerk agree to do something that you didn't want to do. You can call that person back, or text them and say, you know what, I committed to this in haste, and I'm no longer able to do this, and leave it at that, right? So we can reverse things, right? If you go to a party and you realize it's horrible and it's draining, you can leave early. Remember that we have options and we are autonomous and we can exercise those options, all right? So I hope this helps. I'd love to hear from you in the comments too about managing the holidays. Do you have any tips for other people? What have you done that you found that's been really helpful? Love to hear from you. And if you would like to book a consultation with me, my website, skillsetcounseling.com. You can go there and book a consultation, or you can click in the link in the description box. All right, so I hope you have a wonderful and peaceful day. Bye-bye.